Today's show is the one and only Renegade. I apologize that Lorenzo Lamas will not be here today, but shirtless vest wearing will ensue. Originally released for Japanese arcades in 1986 as Nekketsu Kouha Kunio Kun, roughly translating to hot-blooded tough guy Mr. Kunio, and no, I'm not going to discuss Kun and the baffling labyrinth that is Japanese honorifics. This game, made by the Technos Corporation, was the progenitor of the Kunio Kun franchise, best known to Americans with games such as River City Ransom and Super Dodgeball. But there are, in fact, roughly 29 games about little rectangle people violently beating each other. And that's just the core franchise, for Kunio Kun is intertwined with Double Dragon, and also those weird Western-made Renegade games that came out for the Speccy. That same year, it was localized with graphical changes for America, and changed to Renegade. So all in all, this little game Renegade can be said to be the progenitor of almost 40 games. Not bad. The legacy, that is. The game itself is actually pretty bad. Perhaps embryonic would be a better term, for this was essentially the first game in what we now know as the brawler, or beat-em-up genre. They hadn't quite worked out the kinks yet, and frankly, there are a lot worse games of this ilk. In comparing the Japanese and American versions, they basically play the same and have the same music. The music is basic but decently made chiptune rockabilly, which fits the game's pseudo-Yakuza aesthetic. The main differences between the games are graphical, as are the voice clips. Yes, shock and awe, the games had voice acting, death rattles for the enemies as well as taunts from the bosses.
Beat it, gum.
The sound quality is actually pretty good considering what else is coming out at the same time.
But don't forget there are many gods like you all over the world.
Kunio Kun, or Mr. K as he's known in America, is armed with a variety of techniques. On his feet he has very effeminate-looking punches, back kicks, jump kicks, running punches, and the eternal favorite, running into people. In the clinch, he has a shoulder throw, knees, and ground and pound punches. You will immediately realize that some moves are more useful than others. First of all, for God's sake, don't do the ground and pound ever. It just gives your opponents opportunity to punch you in the back of the head, which makes this game disturbingly realistic. You will find that the safest and most effective move is the back kick, which is only used to hit opponents behind you, which means that most of your fights will involve you jockeying around to put yourself in a position of having your back to the opponent. Yeah, think about that for a second. I don't mean to totally lambast the punches. I mean, they work just fine for the regular enemies, of which there are two basic kinds, a fist fighter and a weapons fighter. The latter of which will knock you down in one hit, and the former will punch you and occasionally put you in full Nelsons for further pummeling. When you've whittled the common enemies down to 3, the boss will decide to stop watching and start doing. Speaking of, let's talk about the bosses. They're all goddamn death machines. The only way you can effectively deal with them is the back kick. The jump kick can work sometimes, but it's really more of a war of attrition, as they'll likely take you down with them. Otherwise, don't run at them, don't ground and pound them, and I cannot stress this enough, do not go toe-to-toe with them. So, those are the commonalities between each game and all levels therein. What are the differences? The stages and enemies in each game are all broadly similar, but they have aesthetic changes. Each Japanese stage also begins with a little cinematic of Kunio's friend, not Ricky, getting beaten up, prompting Kunio to give chase to avenge the perplexingly red-headed son of Yamato. The Japanese game has your standard delinquent stereotypes, including the leader with his long open jacket and sriracha bandages, whereas the American game has tank top men, and black men with groovy shirts and big, prominent red lips. Changing the subject, the gang leader here looks like Luther from the Warriors, and David Patrick Kelly making his video game debut. Oh, son of a bitch! The second level takes place fighting a biker gang. Again, the stereotypical Bosuzoku in the Japanese game, and devotees of Kiss in the American game. Wouldn't be the first time Kiss completely sold out. It starts with the bikers rip-roaring and trying to run you over, and after you take out 5 of them, the fighting begins in proper. Otherwise, it's basically similar to level 1, and by the way, this level presents the only chance you have to get a 1-up. I recommend taking it. Oh god, not again! Level 3 shows that Kunio, Mr. K, whatever, is not afraid to keep his pimp hands strong as he takes on a gang of women. In the Japanese game, they're backpack and chain-wielding Sukemon, as indicated by their modified school uniforms. And in the American game, they're club and chain-wielding impoverished medical students, wink wink. In either game, these girls are led by what appears to be Andre the Giant in drag. Note the masculine death rattle. You know, Hiroshi, if you get attacked 4 days in a row, maybe you're doing something wrong. So level 4 involves all the characters having knives. Take 1 hit and you're dead. Also worth noting is that the enemies are basically identical in each game. Just a slight skin tone change. Beat up the knife guys and then you go into the final boss's office, where there are more knife guys and... oh, the final boss has a gun. Of course he does. Man, to hell with Billy and Jimmy Lee, they couldn't take this shit, but it's all worth it in the end. In the American game, Mr. K is rewarded with a voluptuous blonde. I don't even think she was kidnapped, she was just across the parking lot getting a mani-pedi and then she decided to see what was going on. And in the Japanese game, you're rewarded with a handshake. Yeah, Nakama and all that, but seriously, that ass. There were many ports of Renegade, which I will discuss in a later video. And so begins my video retrospective on the Kunio Kun franchise. It's not a formal retrospective, I'm not going to do them all in a row, because you would go insane after the 20th Kunio video. Oh, but eventually they'll get out, sometime. I'm Larson Halleck, keep on training.